Hi, I'm Brendan, and welcome to Cutshort. Love it or hate it, the Amazing Spider-Man movies certainly have stirred some drama among fans. Announced in 2010, Sony's Amazing Spider-Man series was the anticipated reboot of the web-slinger story. Coming off the cancellation of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4, this new telling promised a modern view of the classic character. But only 4 years later, the new series would have already been cancelled. With Spider-Man Homecoming out now, I think it's a good time to take a look back at the controversial Amazing Spider-Man series and what would have happened if Amazing Spider-Man 3 had hit the big screen.
You seem to know an awful lot about this case. You know something that we don't know? I mean, whose side are you on here?
I'm not on anyone's side. I saw a video on the internet.
Oh. You saw the video on the internet. Well, then the case is closed.
Before we get into what the movie would have looked like, we have to take a look back and see why the movie was unplugged in the first place. The film's cancellation was due to mostly 3 factors. The audience reception. It's no secret that Amazing Spider-Man 2's reviews were certainly not amazing. Sony knew all about this. Superhero movies were a major moneymaker and Spider-Man was supposed to be their flagship product. This movie performing poorly with critics was not acceptable. Andrew Garfield himself blamed the film's post-production. In an interview with Daily Beast, he stated, "Once you start throwing things, then the thread is broken and it's hard to go with the flow of the story." When you have your main actor pointing out flaws in your movie after its initial release, you know you've screwed up. Box office revenue. The overall gross of Amazing Spider-Man 3 did not live up to what Sony expected. Amazing Spider-Man 2 was planned to be a $1 billion movie, and there's not much wiggle room when your movie's production cost is $255 million. That's not even including the huge marketing campaign for Spidey. But when the final numbers came in, Amazing Spider-Man 2 slogged about $50 million behind the first installment. The firing of Andrew Garfield. By far the most out-of-nowhere and bizarre reason was the cut of Spider-Man himself. As the story goes, Andrew Garfield was planned to do an event in Rio where Kaz Hirai, the current CEO of Sony, would introduce Andrew to a crowd of 750 guests and announce Amazing Spider-Man 3. But right beforehand, Garfield cancelled due to sickness from his flight over. Kaz Hirai was not happy about this. In a leaked Sony email, an excerpt stated, "Here we are about 1 hour away from our gala event, and Andrew decides he doesn't want to attend. He has a rather scruffy beard and just wants to be left alone." And thus, Andrew Garfield was canned, and the Amazing Spider-Man universe would be rebooted yet again with Tom Holland at the helm. But if none of this would have happened, then what would have Amazing Spider-Man 3 looked like? Well, we know a fair amount of actors that would be returning, such as Andrew Garfield as Spidey, Dane DeHaan as the Green Goblin, Paul Giamatti as the Rhino, and even though she was cut from Amazing Spider-Man 2, Shailene Woodley presumably would have returned for Amazing Spider-Man 3 as Mary Jane Watson. Mark Webb also talked about potentially bringing back J. Jonah Jameson into the universe. J.K. Simmons also stated that he'd be open to return as Jameson. But by far the weirdest part of Amazing Spider-Man 3 that may have hit the movie screen is, well, just listen to this quote from Dennis Leary, who played Gwen Stacy's father, Captain Stacy.
Part of the discussion was that possibly in 3, there was this idea at one point that Spider-Man would be able to take this formula and regenerate the people in his life that had died. So there was this discussion about that Captain Stacy would come back even bigger in episode 3, and I was like, let's go.
Right.
So Spider-Man would start resurrecting people from the dead in the 3rd installment. And not only was there discussion about resurrecting Captain Stacy, but there was also plans of Spidey reviving Gwen Stacy, who died at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 3. Whether or not you may like these plans, they're certainly ambiguous. Resurrecting heroes is incredibly common in comics, so who knows if it would have worked here. Also, rumors of a resurrected Spider-Gwen movie were also on the table. The Spider-Gwen series is set around an alternate universe where Gwen Stacy has the Spider-Man powers instead of Peter Parker. Right now, no more rumors have come out over the plot of Spider-Gwen, so we're not sure how that would have been pulled off. This was not the end of the plans for the Amazing Spider-Man universe, though. Sony wanted to go even more bad guy crazy to set up their villain-centric Sinister Six movie. The members of their Sinister Six movie never have been fully confirmed, but the rumored members consisted of Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Rhino, Vulture, Kraven the Hunter, and the 6th member never truly had any rumors with real weight to it. When researching this video, I found sources that said Black Cat and others that said Mysterio. But speaking of villains, Eddie Brock was rumored to appear in Amazing Spider-Man 3 to set up their Venom solo film. It seems like Sony had not learned their lesson about cramming too much into one movie. But currently that's all we know and may ever know about Amazing Spider-Man 3. Even though the ideas may seem crazy, the concept could possibly work. Although given the quality of Amazing Spider-Man 2, it seemed unlikely. We may never see these movies come to the big screen, but it's nice to take a look back and see what may have happened if Sony kept these plans. Wait, what?